Welcome to this second video in this series on the most commonly misused GRE words. The full list is in a link in the description. Now, just quickly, I am going to be doing some quant videos soon. I know many of you have requests for different quant topics, and I am intending to get to them soon. It's my birthday coming up, so I'm going to take a little break, but I will be back very soon. But for now, for today, a quick video on some more of these commonly confused words. And I think this video and this list is brilliant for anyone. Obviously those taking the GRE so they don't confuse these words, but also anyone just looking to improve their vocabulary in general. I haven't seen all of this list, so I might not know the difference between some of these words myself. But without further ado, let's get to the first pair. Alternate versus alternative. I used to get this wrong all the time. To alternate means to switch between two things. To alternate between left and right. You go to one, then you go to the other, then you go to the other, etc. Whereas an alternative is like a replacement. I've got a main plan, but I also have an alternative plan. Like a backup, a replacement. I know you want to go to this restaurant, but shall we try out the alternative? Shall we try out the other choice, the other option? That's how I remember it now, and I always used to get this wrong. So there is a difference between those two words. Let's see what they say. Alternate is an adjective and means occurring by turns, yes. She liked the shirt with alternate shades of white and grey. White, then grey, then white, then grey, etc. Alternative means thing done or had instead of something else, a choice. Is there an alternative to this plan of yours? Yes. Okay, I think that's fairly clear. Now let's get on to this one. Emend versus emend. I would say that I'm not fully confident. I know that to emend something with an E, think with an E is like the word edit. To emend is like to edit a text usually. That's how I remember it. To amend something is definitely when you're editing an error, for example. But to amend, I never quite remember the difference between that and emend. Amend is a verb and means change or correct. So something quite similar. You should amend your current plan if you want to visit that place. I guess the way you could remember it is that amend is more broad. Anytime you're just changing anything, you're altering or changing a plan, a prediction, a course of events, anything broad. Whereas emend, in my usage, is only when you're editing usually a text, basically. So that's how you can remember it. E at the beginning of emend could refer in your mind to edit, editing, whereas amend is more broad. You should amend your current plan, whereas the editor emended the intern's article. I should pronounce it correctly without the emphasis, just so you know how to pronounce it. Amend and emend. Okay. Among versus between. This is quite a famous distinction in the GMAT actually that you need to know, but also could be useful for the GRE. Among is for three or more things. So can you pick among the four options available? That's when you'd say among, three or more options. Whereas between has to be specifically two options. Meaning you can't say, I didn't know what to choose between options A, B, and C. You can't actually say that. Between is for two choices, two alternatives. Whereas among is three or more. How do they say it? Among is a preposition and means in the midst of. He was one among the three players. Between means between 2 points, yes. I travel between New York and Chicago, 2 places there. Obviously, it could be a large group with among, so he was stood among the crowd, for example. Okay, I think that's clear. Next one. Amoral versus immoral. It's a tough one. I think I learnt this during my philosophy class. Amoral means not having any morals. That doesn't mean being immoral, which is like bad morals. Amoral just not to do with morals. They don't associate with morals. So someone who just doesn't concern themselves at all with morals. They don't believe in morals. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're a bad person. Just that although it usually means they're a bad person, but also could just mean they think morals are outdated and they just live by their own rules. Okay? Whereas immoral is specifically bad morals, someone doing things that are unethical. Now, I would agree with you if you said to me there isn't much of a distinction. Someone who doesn't have any morals or doesn't believe in morals versus someone who has bad morals? And I would say to you, yes, in common English usage, they are quite similar. If you describe something as being amoral, then that's not far off from saying it's immoral. But I guess if you're calling something immoral, you're saying, I have my code of beliefs and you're going against it. It's immoral. Whereas amoral just means someone who doesn't seem to believe in any beliefs at all, any moral standards. So there is a slight distinction there. What do they say? Amoral. By the way, the A at the beginning, like atheist or whatever, means without. So amoral, without morals. Amoral means without moral standards, principles, or rules. Whereas immoral means transgressing or breaking moral rules that do exist. So that's an interesting debate that you can have with yourself or others as to whether there's a significant difference between them. What one person's immorality is another person's amorality, for example. Anti versus anti, this is a good one. Anti with an E means before, whereas anti with an I means against. Now, this is a distinction that's not so much useful for the actual words themselves, because they wouldn't really come up on their own, but more for knowing the etymology of hundreds of other words that begin with anti or anti is pronounced the same. And just knowing that anti with an E means before and anti with an I means against can help you understand at least dozens of other words that you might not initially know. Anti-meridian means before the middle of the day, right? Meridian, middle. So anti-meridian with an E, before the middle of the day, before noon. There's another word, for example, antediluvian, which means before the flood, before the time of Noah, so like ancient times, basically. And you might know a bit more about that word from having known that anti with an E means before, whereas anti with an I means against. Anti-communists are against communists. What about appraise versus apprise? I have no idea. I think appraise is to assess, but then apprise, I don't know what the difference would be there. Okay. Actually, I just don't think I know the word apprise, full stop. Appraise is a verb and means to assess the value. I knew that. An appraisal is like an assessment, or to appraise the value of something means to assess the value or quality of it. I agree and know that one. But what does apprise mean? Okay, so this is a distinction I needed to know. So apprise is a bit like to inform, I guess. Let me inform you of your current situation. Let me apprise you of your current situation. Not a word that's used terribly often, to be honest, but it's good to know, and it's definitely good to know the difference between the two. To appraise, with the A there, means to assess, and apprise means to inform. Okay. Assure versus insure. I used to make this mistake myself, but not anymore, hopefully. To assure is to like guarantee something. For example, I assure you I'm going to be on time. You're giving assurances. You're trying to guarantee or promise something. Whereas insure is like insurance. You're backing it up. You're preparing a plan in case things go wrong. It's a very different word. Insurance versus assurance. To assure someone, you're pledging, I'm going to make sure it happens. Whereas insure, you're kind of saying, if it goes wrong, this is the plan. Let's do some example sentences. I assure you that your money is safe with me. I promise you. Whereas the insure, they put the wrong word here. They wrote insure with an E. That's a different word, actually. So they've made a mistake here. They've put the word with an E. But this is a good opportunity for me to teach you a third word. So insure with an E means to make certain. You're absolutely going to make it happen. And assurance with an A is a promise. Whereas to insure with an E is not a promise, it's the act of making it happen. So he ensured his success with an E by rigging the ballot. Okay, so insure with an E is the act of making it certain. Whereas assure with an A is the promise that it's certain. And insure with an I is the backup plan in case it doesn't happen, to insure yourself against failure. And we have now covered 3 words. I think they meant to write E here instead of I, but you know all 3 words now. Assure, insure, and insure. The E one obviously pronounced in the same way as the I one. But yes, to insure with an E is the act of making something certain. I will ensure that your children will have access to the best education possible. Okay, next one. Oral versus oral. Commonly confused. Doesn't come up too much though, to be honest, but good to know the difference. Basically, the one with an A is to do with your ear, sounds. One with an O is to do with your mouth. So oral with an A means relating to the ears. People today are seeking relief from an overload of oral stimulus due to traffic, so all that noise coming into your ears, or to do with your mouth. So oral pills, obviously you take it through the mouth. That is the distinction there. Commonly confused, and this word with the A is increasingly not even understood, I'd say. Most people wouldn't even know that word. So it's good for you to know the difference there. They're pronounced in the same way, unfortunately, pretty much, so quite hard to hear the distinction. Okay, this is a fun one. Biannual versus biennial. Biannual means twice, annually, twice a year. It's going to happen twice every year, so every 6 months. Biennial, even though it looks like a similar word, means every 2 years. Triennial means every 3 years. Quadrennial, I think is how it's pronounced, every 4 years. Or annual, obviously, every year, but biennial, every 2 years. Notice the difference? Biannual, twice a year. So biannual, every 6 months. Biennial, every 2 years. Very easily confused there. So if you can make this distinction clear to yourself now, it's going to save you lots of perennial confusion in the years to come. And the last one, blatant versus flagrant. I would say the distinction there is that blatant means obvious, and flagrant means obvious, but in a clearly negative sense. So if something is blatant, you might make a blatant mistake. It's an obvious mistake. It's clear to everyone. Or her plan was very blatant, very obvious. Everyone knew what she was doing. And flagrant, you might think is the same thing, obvious, but we're specifically talking about negative things. We're definitely talking about negative things. Whereas blatant could be about good plans or bad plans, something being obvious in a good way or a bad way. Flagrant is only for negatives. That was a flagrant breach of the rules, an obvious bad breach of the rules. Her behaviour was flagrant, obvious, conspicuous in a bad way. That for me would be the distinction between the words. Let's see if they agree. Yes, blatant means glaringly obvious. The driver showed a blatant, obvious disregard for the lives of children crossing the road. But flagrant means openly outrageous with that negative connotation. Several communities have condemned the flagrant remarks of the minister. So they're not just obvious and conspicuous and loud, but they are so in a bad way. I think that's a fairly clear distinction there. Either way, hope this quick video helped you. If it did, leave a like and leave a comment, and see you in the next installment of this exciting series.